The Revolution. Before the 1979 revolution, Iran and Israel were not enemies. They quietly worked together by trading oil, sharing military technology, and exchanging intelligence. Under the Shah's rule, Iran helped Israel behind the scenes, but stayed silent in public to avoid angering nearby Arab countries. In private, though, the two acted like secret friends who didn't want anyone to find out. Then came the revolution, and everything turned upside down. Ayatollah Khomeini overthrew the Shah and replaced his rule with a government driven by religious ideology. At the heart of this new regime was a belief that Israel had no right to exist. Khomeini didn't just oppose Israel. He demanded its destruction and severed all diplomatic relations. In place of former alliances, Iran began supporting groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Many of these groups didn't stop at speeches. They moved straight to launching rockets and carrying out attacks. For Israel, the shift was dramatic. A former trading partner had become a lasting enemy. Iran was no longer seen as just another rival. It was viewed as a global threat, not because of territory or weapons alone, but because its government was built around eliminating Israel. This was no longer a simple political disagreement or border issue. It became an ideological battle. Iran portrayed Israel as a puppet of the West, while Israel saw Iran as an emerging power determined to surround it with militant proxies. The revolution of 1979 didn't just change who ruled Iran. It unleashed a wave of tension that began a Cold War between the two nations, one that has never truly ended. The cyber battlefield. While everyone watches the missiles, another war is happening online. By 2025, the cyber fight between Iran and Israel was no secret anymore. Power plants, hospitals, and trains were all targets. You don't need soldiers when you can shut down a city with a computer. Iran's hackers attacked Israel's water systems and hospital networks. In one case, they almost changed the chemicals in a water plant, just to show they could. Israel hit back harder, crashing Iranian banks, air traffic systems, and even taking over state TV to show anti-government messages. Tehran's metro signs were hacked to say "Death to the dictators." These cyber attacks don't kill people, but they create fear and chaos. They make people lose trust in their government. Since it's hard to know who's behind them, they can keep happening without starting a full war. In today's world, the battlefield isn't just on land or in the air. It's online. Iran's proxy web. Iran rarely fights Israel directly. Instead, it funds, arms, and trains proxy groups across the Middle East to act on its behalf. Hezbollah in Lebanon is the most powerful, heavily supported by Iran. It has fired thousands of rockets into Israel and turned southern Lebanon into an Iranian stronghold. In Yemen, the Houthis have grown from a local militia into a key ally, attacking Saudi oil sites, Red Sea ships, and now Israel, as part of Iran's regional strategy. Across Iraq and Syria, smaller Iran-backed militias target U.S. and Israeli forces through covert operations and secret funding. This proxy network lets Iran project power while denying direct involvement. When rockets fly, it can claim, "It wasn't us." Why Israel hit first and why now? By 2025, Israel's patience had run out. Iran was testing longer-range missiles, stockpiling enriched uranium, and issuing constant threats. Though Tehran claimed its nuclear program was peaceful, Israel wasn't willing to risk it. On June 13th, it struck first. Operation Rising Lion was a swift, calculated assault. Israeli jets penetrated Iranian airspace and hit key targets in Tehran, Isfahan, and Hamadan, striking nuclear and military sites including Nutan, Arak, and Parchin. Simultaneously, Mossad operatives inside Iran launched coordinated assassinations, drone strikes, and sabotage missions, killing senior officers and scientists. Iran's air defenses collapsed quickly, leaving Israeli aircraft largely unchallenged. The operation aimed not just to halt Iran's nuclear ambitions, but to cripple its military infrastructure and send a clear warning: Israel can strike anywhere. Whether this bold, preemptive move secures lasting safety or sparks a wider conflict remains to be seen. The war that actually began, Iran struck back fast. Less than 2 days after Israel's Rising Lion attack, it launched a massive counterstrike that rocked the Middle East. Missiles, drones, and suicide UAVs were fired from Iran, Iraq, Yemen, and Syria, hitting military bases in cities like Tel Aviv and Haifa. Israel's Iron Dome intercepted many attacks but was overwhelmed. Dozens were killed, hundreds injured, and panic spread across the country. Israel went into full war mode. Bomb shelters opened, reserves were called up, and flights were stopped. Iran's allies joined in. Hezbollah fired thousands of rockets from Lebanon. Houthis sent long-range drones from Yemen, and Iraqi militias attacked U.S. bases to drag America into the fight. The conflict quickly became a regional war, just short of nuclear escalation. Civilians were dying, economies were crashing, and oil prices soared. The UN held emergency talks as the world watched, fearing what would come next. Why Israel wants regime change. You won't hear regime change in speeches, but you can see it in missile trails and broken servers. Over the years, Iranian scientists have been assassinated, convoys have exploded, and research sites have gone dark, all sending a clear message. Israel isn't just targeting weapons, it's targeting the entire system behind them. The scientists, factories, and leadership. From Israel's view, peace is impossible while Iran's regime remains in power. Security isn't a policy, it's survival. Instead of a full invasion, Israel wages a shadow war, assassinations, cyber attacks like Stuxnet, diplomatic pressure, and now, in 2025, direct strikes on Iran's military and government sites. Some reports even suggest quiet support for Iranian dissidents. It's a slow, deliberate campaign to weaken Tehran's grip. Israel may never say it out loud, but the goal is clear. Less uranium, fewer ayatollahs. Why Iran wants regime change. Officially, Iran claims it's fighting Zionism, not Israelis. But if you look closer, nearly every speech, missile, and military drill is aimed at bringing down the Israeli government, not just opposing it. Tehran doesn't say regime change, but its actions make that goal obvious. By funding groups like Hezbollah and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Iran is fighting a slow, grinding war meant to wear Israel out from all sides. It wants Israel surrounded, under pressure, and constantly on edge, believing that the weaker and more unstable Israel looks, the easier it will be to challenge its legitimacy, especially in the Arab world. Tehran's strategy isn't about one big victory. It's about steady, long-term pressure, through cyber attacks, propaganda, diplomacy, and proxy wars, to exhaust Israel over time. The goal isn't to destroy Israel in one strike, but to weaken it gradually until it falls apart from within. So far, though, that plan remains just a dream. For all its challenges, Israel isn't showing any signs of giving in. Why Hezbollah sat this one out. Hezbollah is usually Iran's loudest ally, quick to fire rockets from Lebanon whenever tensions rise. But in 2025, they stayed unusually quiet. The reason was timing and survival. After months of smaller clashes, Hezbollah had lost top commanders, dozens of fighters, and much of its ammunition. Israeli drones were constantly in the sky, making any move risky. Then there's Lebanon's situation. The country's economy is collapsing, the government is weak, and people are tired of war. Most Lebanese don't want their homes destroyed over Iran's battles. Even Hezbollah's leaders know that a major war could break the country completely. So this time, they held back. Just a few rockets for show, nothing more. Hezbollah still supports Iran, but in 2025, loyalty had limits. Pushing harder could mean losing everything. Iran's nuclear threats. Iran has long pushed its nuclear program to the edge, enough to alarm the world, but not enough to start a war. But if it ever conducts a nuclear test, even a small underground one, everything would change. Such a test would prove that Iran is a nuclear power, not just a potential one. That could spark regional panic. For Israel, whose policy is to prevent any enemy from going nuclear, this would cross a clear red line. Retaliation would be almost certain. Arab states quietly working with Israel might back away, fearing wider conflict. The U.S. would face intense pressure, some calling for war, others urging caution. Meanwhile, Iran's allies would celebrate the test as a major victory and a warning to the West. Even without using a bomb, simply proving it exists would shift the balance of power in the Middle East. For Iran, it's leverage. For Israel, it's a nightmare, spreading chaos far beyond the battlefield. Iran's proxy wars and oil sabotage. Iran doesn't always fight directly. When the pressure rises, it switches tactics, hitting where it hurts most. While Israel watched the skies, Iran targeted the seas, pipelines, and the global economy. Its first move was in the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow route that carries a third of the world's oil. Iran threatened to block it, planted sea mines, and sent out speedboats. Several oil tankers were attacked or sabotaged, sending energy prices soaring and triggering global panic. Next came the Red Sea, where Iran-backed Houthi rebels fired missiles and drones at ships. One drone even struck a cargo vessel moving goods between Europe and Asia. The message was simple. If Iran can't hit Israel directly, it will disrupt global trade instead. At the same time, Iran activated proxy groups in Iraq and Syria to stretch Israel's defenses and pressure the U.S. into reacting. Behind the scenes, cyber attacks hit oil companies, ports, and airline satellites, spreading chaos far beyond the battlefield. The awkward role of the U.S. and Trump's tightrope act. America didn't start the war, but quickly found itself entangled. Long a key ally of Israel and a critic of Iran, the U.S. had spent decades providing aid, intelligence, and defense support. By 2025, Donald Trump was back in office with Marco Rubio as vice president, aiming to project strength without starting another Middle Eastern war. That changed when Iran struck U.S. bases in Iraq, killing soldiers and damaging airfields. The U.S. responded by deploying carriers, boosting defenses, and covertly aiding Israel through intelligence and limited strikes on Iran-backed militias, careful not to declare full-scale war. In Washington, Democrats called for restraint while Republicans pushed for retaliation. Trump balanced public threats with boasts about his approval ratings, warning Iran not to test America. Caught between action and restraint, the U.S. faces a fragile balance. Support Israel too openly and risk escalation, stay cautious and appear weak. The Gaza factor. Iran isn't sending soldiers to Gaza. It's sending money, weapons, and ideology. That's enough to keep the region unstable. For years, Tehran has funded and trained groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad, not to make peace, but to keep pressure on Israel. By 2025, this strategy intensified. Rocket attacks from Gaza into southern Israel often followed Iran's timing, not local events. After any major Israeli strike on Iran, like against a nuclear site, missiles from Gaza quickly followed. It was Iran's way of using Gaza as a southern distraction, forcing Israel to fight on multiple fronts. From Hezbollah in the north to Houthis in Yemen, Iran's goal is to make Israel feel surrounded. It doesn't need to control Gaza. Influence is cheaper than occupation. When Hamas launches attacks, Iran can sit back and watch as Israel drains its defenses and patience. Types of military tactics.
Blinding laser weapons. If you've ever gone outside on a really sunny day and tried to look directly at the sun, you know how impossible and painful that is. Now imagine someone aiming a beam brighter than the sun's rays directly into your eyes. Sounds horrific, right? Unfortunately, that's exactly what blinding laser weapons were designed to do. These weapons were specifically engineered to cause permanent blindness. If your eyes accidentally came into contact with one of these beams, there was a high chance you'd lose your vision forever. You'd likely be relying on visual aids or even a guide for the rest of your life. Lasers have been incredibly useful for the military, especially for targeting, range finding, and guiding other weapons. But weaponizing them to deliberately blind people crossed a line, from tactical advantage to outright cruelty. Permanent blindness is a life-altering consequence no soldier signs up for, even in war. Thankfully, in 1998, blinding laser weapons were banned as tools of war under international law. Chemical warfare. If you were born in the early 1900s, chances are you'd have been enlisted as a soldier in World War I. Wars are already brutal and deadly events that claim millions of lives. But now imagine, on top of all that, being hit by a giant cloud of poisonous gas that made your lungs and skin feel like someone poured a mix of acid, pepper, and garlic all over you. That's what chemical warfare was all about. While you were stuck in filthy trenches trying to dodge bullets and bombs, you'd suddenly feel like you had just inhaled a bucket of hot sauce. Before you even realized what was happening, your entire battalion could be choking to death on their own vomit and bodily fluids. Chemical warfare used toxic agents like mustard gas, chlorine gas, and nerve agents to incapacitate or kill enemy forces. These gases didn't just make you cough, they attacked your lungs, your skin, and even your sanity. Victims suffered severe blisters, blindness, lung damage, and often a slow and painful death. What made chemical weapons especially terrifying was their lack of precision. They didn't just hit enemy soldiers, they contaminated everything in their path: civilians, animals, crops, and the environment itself. Thankfully, after witnessing the horrific effects of chemical warfare during World War I, the world decided enough was enough. In 1925, the Geneva Protocol was signed, banning the use of chemical weapons in war. The international community agreed that suffocating your enemies in a cloud of invisible poison was a step too far, even in the horrors of war. Perfidy. Imagine you're playing hide and seek with a friend, and someone suddenly steps out and says, "I give up. I'm not hiding anymore." So you come out of your spot, only to get jumped by the same person who just claimed they were done playing. Pretty unfair, right? Well, that's exactly what perfidy is. But instead of a playground game, it happens during war, with far more serious consequences. Perfidy is when one side pretends to surrender or stop fighting, maybe by waving a white flag or claiming they're giving up, only to launch a surprise attack the moment the other side lets their guard down. It's like swearing on your mum's life that you're done fighting and then stabbing the other person in the back. This kind of deceptive tactic is especially harmful because war is already chaotic, exhausting, and dangerous. Using lies and tricks to lure enemies into a false sense of safety not only makes things worse, but also undermines trust in the few rules of war that exist. Sometimes perfidy goes even further. Some groups might disguise themselves as civilians or use civilian buildings for attacks. This not only breaks the rules, but it puts real civilians at risk. If soldiers can't tell who's a threat anymore, they might start treating everyone, even innocent people, as enemies. It's like being at a costume party and mistaking every guest for the villain. Because of the danger and dishonesty involved, perfidy is banned under international humanitarian law. It was first outlawed in the Hague Conventions of 1907 and later reinforced by the Geneva Conventions of 1949. Because in war, just like in life, nobody likes being lied to. Cluster munitions. To understand cluster munitions, picture this. You're standing at the top of a staircase, holding a bag full of marbles. Then you tear it open, and the marbles scatter everywhere, rolling uncontrollably down the stairs. Now imagine that, instead of marbles, you're dropping tiny bombs, and instead of a staircase, you're unleashing them on a battlefield. That's essentially what cluster munitions do. These weapons are designed to cover a wide area with explosives, turning a single bomb into a party pack of destruction. It sounds efficient from a military perspective, until you realize how unreliable and dangerous these weapons really are. The problem is that not all of the bomblets explode on impact. Many just lie around, unexploded, waiting to be triggered by anything or anyone. A soldier, a curious child, or even a wandering animal could accidentally set one off. It's like leaving mousetraps all over your house and just hoping no one steps on them. This isn't a strategy, it's a recipe for chaos and tragedy. Because of the long-term threat they pose, cluster munitions were banned in the 2008 Convention on Cluster Munitions. They don't just endanger people during conflict, they remain a deadly hazard for years afterward. Imagine going for a peaceful stroll, long after a war has ended, only to step on one of these forgotten party favors. Not exactly a fun surprise. Poisoned weapons. Poisoned weapons are basically the battlefield version of playing dirty, because nothing screams fair fight quite like sneaking something toxic into your enemy's drink, or, more directly, into their bloodstream. Picture it. While your opponent is dodging bullets and bombs, you decide to borrow a page from the medieval playbook and coat your blade, arrowhead, or bullet with venom. The goal wasn't just to injure, it was to make sure the injury became lethal, laced with unbearable agony. This tactic was outlawed under the Hague Declaration of 1899 and later reinforced by the Chemical Weapons Convention of 1993. Aside from being a particularly gruesome method of killing, poisoned weapons are the ultimate act of cowardice. They bring with them slow, excruciating deaths, convulsions, foaming at the mouth, and all the other nightmarish symptoms you'd expect in a horror film about medieval torture. The suffering caused is so excessive that it's considered unacceptable, even in the already brutal realm of war. Hostage taking. Picture this. It's the Second World War, and you're just trying to keep your head down when enemy troops storm into your town. They burn, loot, and then round up you and others, turning you from innocent civilians into bargaining chips. That's hostage-taking in a nutshell. It doesn't just happen to civilians. Soldiers can be taken too. Captors hold them to force negotiations, make demands, or even use them as human shields. It's essentially saying, I've got your people, so do what I want, or else. Not exactly a noble tactic, and one widely seen as a cowardly move. The damage isn't only to those in captivity. The mere threat of hostage-taking spreads fear through entire communities, creating constant anxiety and disrupting daily life. Recognizing the severe physical and psychological toll, the international community outlawed the practice in 1979, labeling it a blatant violation of human rights. At its core, hostage-taking is about reducing people to pawns in a violent game they never agreed to play, a game that can end in tragedy if the captor's demands aren't met. Scorched earth policy. You imagine coming home to find burglars in your house. Instead of calling the police or trying to stop them, you decide to torch the entire place, burning your home, your belongings, and the thieves along with them. That's the essence of the scorched earth policy. If you can't keep it, no one will. In warfare, this means that instead of retreating quietly, an army deliberately destroys everything in its path. Farms, homes, bridges, livestock, even whole towns. So the enemy has nothing left to use. It's the ultimate, if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me move. The cost, however, is devastating. Civilians are left without food, shelter, or the means to rebuild. Even the side carrying out the destruction can suffer long-term consequences. This tactic is less about winning battles and more about ensuring there's nothing left to win or lose. While it has been used throughout history, it's considered a last resort, a medieval-style way of flipping the chessboard when you realize you're losing. The Geneva Conventions condemn and ban scorched earth tactics, emphasizing that wars should be fought between soldiers, not at the expense of civilians or the land they depend on.
White phosphorus against civilians? Think about the sting of snow or ice on bare skin. Now flip that sensation completely. Imagine that instead of cold, it feels like molten lava pouring over you. That's the kind of agony white phosphorus causes on contact, except even worse. White phosphorus is a chemical that ignites the moment it meets oxygen. Once airborne, it burns at around 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt through flesh and bone. It also releases thick white smoke, which can hide troop movements on the battlefield, but can also suffocate anyone unlucky enough to be nearby. This stuff is like the military's fire-breathing dragon. Only this dragon doesn't care who it scorches. The particles stick to skin, clothing, and gear, burning relentlessly until they're deprived of oxygen. The injuries are deep, agonizing, and often fatal. Surviving the initial strike doesn't mean escaping the horror. It can mean a lifetime of severe burns and trauma. Because of its indiscriminate and devastating effects, using white phosphorus directly against civilians is banned under Protocol 3 of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. It's allowed only for specific military uses, such as creating smokescreens or battlefield illumination, kind of like how fireworks are fine in a public show, but a terrible idea in your living room. Pillage. So let's just imagine that you're a medieval peasant minding your own business on a peaceful Sunday afternoon. You've just finished harvesting your crops and you're about to enjoy a nice cup of ale when suddenly, out of nowhere, a group of soldiers comes barging into your farmland. They literally start taking everything by force, your crops, your livestock, your shiny new pitchfork, and leave you with nothing but your muddy boots. Well, this broad daylight stealing is called pillaging, and it is when soldiers loot and plunder everything they can lay their hands on in an enemy's territory. Now, as tempting as it might be for an army to grab anything that isn't nailed down, pillaging is banned as a military strategy because it is just plain unfair. Think about it. You're not even a soldier. You're a farmer who spends all day planting turnips, not plotting world domination. So why should you lose everything? Because some army is passing through. It's like being grounded because your sibling did something wrong. Noon likes that, especially when you didn't do anything to deserve it. It's also really counterproductive and dumb, because armies need supplies to keep going. Food, water, and shelter, and if they pillage a town and take everything, what's left for them when they next pass through? It's like eating all your snacks during the first 5 minutes of a road trip. What are you going to munch on for the next 8 hours? Ultimately, pillaging is banned because it drags out conflicts, creates unnecessary hardships, and leaves you the soldier on the wrong side of history and the law. Denial of quarter. Imagine you're on a battlefield, outnumbered, outgunned, and completely exhausted. You can barely lift your arms, let alone aim a weapon. So you and your comrades do the only sensible thing. You surrender. Weapons on the ground, hands in the air, knees in the dirt. You're ready to end the nightmare. But instead of accepting your surrender, the enemy commander orders their troops to open fire. At that point, it's no longer a fight. It's cold-blooded killing. This is denial of quarter, a brutal tactic where surrender is not an option. The unspoken rule is simple: fight or die. Even if you wave a white flag, throw down your weapons, and plead for mercy, the answer under this policy is always the same. None will be given. No prisoners, no compassion. Because it's both cruel and a direct violation of the laws of war, denial of quarter is banned under the Geneva Conventions and customary international humanitarian law. Surrendered or wounded combatants are supposed to be treated with basic humanity, medical care, food, shelter, not executed on the spot. Denying quarter is considered a war crime because it removes the possibility of surrender, forcing combatants to fight to the death and causing needless bloodshed on both sides. In short, it's the kind of warfare the world has agreed should never happen again. Terror bombing, picture this. You're in your hometown, going about an ordinary day, when the wail of an air raid siren cuts through the air. You look up, and the once clear sky is swarming with enemy aircraft. Moments later, bombs start raining down, not on military bases, but right into the heart of your city. Streets erupt in fire and rubble, and chaos spreads like wildfire. That's terror bombing, a tactic where civilian areas are deliberately targeted to crush morale and force surrender. The strategy is simple and ruthless. Make daily life unbearable by destroying homes, schools, hospitals, and infrastructure until the population's desperation pushes their leaders to give in. It's the "if we can't break their army, we'll break their spirit" approach to warfare. One of the most infamous examples came in World War II, when atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. 6 days later, Japan surrendered, but at the cost of unimaginable civilian suffering. Because of its indiscriminate nature and its aim to terrorize non-combatants, terror bombing is now banned under the Geneva Conventions and other international treaties. War, brutal as it is, still has rules, and one of the most basic is this: civilians are not targets.